Our recent story about 13-year-old Olivia Schnacker's death in a Boise crosswalk got the Valley talking, and many people had questions.
Olivia Schnacker was hit by a car on Easter Sunday when she was riding her bike across the crosswalk here with her brother and sister. Her brother and sister actually made it safely to this side, and Olivia was hit just before she could safely meet her brother and sister. The driver, who was coming this direction, said that she couldn't see the children because the sun was in her eyes.
They were riding their bikes. My son Joshua got to the edge of the street where the curve starts into the sidewalk, and that's where he heard the loud whoosh, and he heard his sister scream. She was on the bike. The bike flew out in the same direction as the car was going, and Olivia went back up onto the windshield, and her impact on the top part of the windshield where the goes to the roof of the car. When I got down here, my daughter was holding my other two children, and as soon as they saw me and could get close to me, they ran to me and just latched onto me, and it was all surreal. The fire truck and the ambulance had come at that point, and they were over there treating her. An officer came over to me, and it was like sensory overload. There were so many things going on. There was different sights and sounds and smells and just everything. I could feel people touch me. I could hear people trying to talk to me. It was just so much. I couldn't understand what was happening. An officer came over to me, and as this officer came over to me to take me across the street, people came up and handed me one shoe of my daughter's, and I knew it was hers. They handed me her phone. As we were crossing the street, I could see her through the people laying on the ground. I tried to look the other direction, and I could see the car, and I could see the windshield, and it was broke. And she wasn't getting up. They walked me around to the ambulance, and they had me get into the front seat to ride with them. And soon I could hear them putting her into the back of the ambulance. And I could hear her gurgling, trying to grasp for air. And I could hear them trying to talk to her and trying to call her name to try to get her to wake up, to respond. I had to plug my ears. I couldn't take it. That ride was one of the slowest rides of my life. You see ambulances and fire trucks going down the road. Get out of their way. It seemed like no one would move. It was so slow. And yet I know we were going so fast trying to get us there, but it took forever. When we arrived at the hospital and they took her out of the back of the ambulance, I just jumped out and sat down. I was alone. There wasn't anybody there for me. I didn't want to go inside because I didn't want to know. It happened on April 20th, 2014. We were in the hospital that night. They needed to do some surgery, but she wasn't stable enough until 4 o'clock the next morning on the 21st. They did the surgery, and they were doing all that they could for her. The next day on the 22nd, later in the evening, she no longer had brain activity. And that's when they called time of death. And even to this day, it's very, very difficult for me to talk about that day, what happened with my children. It's been 4 years, and just 2 months ago, I had an actual conversation with my oldest daughter about what she remembers from it. They still do, all three of them. They still have problems because of this. Mental health problems, school problems, severe depression, severe anxiety, panic attacks, acting out, not being able to express themselves. All three of my other children rode a bus that went by this crosswalk every single day, twice a day, to school and home from school. And it broke my heart that my children had to go by this every day. I avoided it. I did not come down this road. It could have been prevented. It didn't need to happen. There was no reason for this to happen. It was completely preventable. That is just, honestly, that is the nuts and bolts of this, is the driver did not pay attention. The driver was driving down the road, needed to be completely in control of the vehicle that they were driving. That pertains to everything around them. Everything. The speed that they're going, the steering wheel in the direction that they're going, the community around them, whether it be anything, a cat, a dog, a pedestrian, a bicyclist, they needed to be aware of their entire surroundings, and they weren't.
What do you think should have happened to the driver?
Honestly, I believe that she should have had some kind of consequence. She had none. Zero. There wasn't even a ticket for driving too fast for road conditions, where she stated herself, she admitted and accepted that she was driving down the road, not at a slower speed, and she could not see because the sun was in her eyes. There was nothing done. There was no tickets. There was no consequence. In my mind, that's what's not right about the whole thing. I actually just recently, this April, was out here with my children, and a man stopped and he came over to me and told me it was time to take this down. This was on the anniversary of the death of my daughter. I told him who he was, and he said, I know. He said it was inconvenient for him to have to explain to his child why it's there. I look at it a different way. We should be explaining to our children why it's here. We should be talking to our children, have that conversation. Explain to them that you have to be safe. These cars on this road, they may be going at the as posted speed, but that's fast when you're trying to cross the street. It can happen. It did happen. We should be having these conversations with our children, and we shouldn't be afraid to have these conversations with our children to be safe. They should be made aware what steps to take to be safe in their community. They should know what can happen so that our children will grow up and fight for the entire community to be safe, so that we can have roads for our cars and our buses and our trucks to be able to get from place to place, but that we can also have a safe community for anyone who wants to ride their bike, walk, wheelchair accessible, to be safe in their community that they live in.